Today we're going to talk about how you can get started using watercolor paints. We're going to talk about types of paper, brushes. We're going to have a practice sheet on how you can use some techniques to get better and more comfortable using watercolors. And then in the second part of the video, you're going to learn how to make your values using watercolors, going from dark to light, using 5 different types of watercolors. Let's go. There are all types of papers. Sketchbook paper, not that great for watercolors, doesn't hold up. Bristol paper is pretty good, but it's not the best. If you can get your hands on some actual watercolor paper, that's going to be able to hold up to all the water you're going to add. A traditional watercolor is great for very thin mediums. A synthetic nylon is great for a catch-all. It's great for many things. And then your bristle brush is great for heavy body paints. I'm drawing a practice paper. Adding water to our watercolor cakes to start to hydrate them, to turn them into paint, because it's otherwise just a semi-moist cake. Starting off with our basic colors, our basic 6 colors of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. These are the 6 most basic colors that must be part of any true color wheel. Now on the bottom here, I'm starting with red, jumping to yellow, then painting blue. These are our 3 primary colors that we can then mix and layer to create the other. I've created orange, which is the first secondary color. I'm about to create some green by starting with yellow, adding a little bit of blue, and letting it mix. And then for our third secondary color, we're going to make some purple starting with red and adding a little bit of blue. Doing some different techniques, wet on wet, adding water first, then adding our paint, letting it flow together, one color to another. Wet on dry means your paper's dry, you add your paint, it keeps a crisp, clean line. Starting here adding water, then I'm going to add some paint, and then I'm going to spritz it with some alcohol. It breaks up our paint. Next I'm going to add some paint on dry paper. I'm going to spritz that, and you can see the paint breaking up. Next I'm layering in some paint and sprinkling on some table salt. This starts to create a different type of texture. And then below that I'm doing the same thing, but I'm adding sea salt instead. It's a thicker green salt, so it's going to create a different texture. I should have waited just a bit longer to let the paint start to dry out. It was too wet when I added it, so it didn't make quite as good of an effect. So I sprinkled a little bit more on, and it gave a little bit better of a texture. And then I'm using a hairdryer to finish off drying the paint. So you see our end results of our color wheels. Our wet on wet method, very flowy. Wet on dry, very clean, crisp edges. Watercolor with alcohol to create that broken effect. And then watercolor with various salts to create a textured effect. Now, let's get into the different types of watercolors. Starting with the traditional cakes. We have more expensive cakes that you add water to reconstitute your paint. Have our traditional tube set. You still add water, but it's already liquid. We have oil pastels that can be turned into paint, and colored pencils that can be turned into paint as well. I've drawn out a value scale, and what we're going to do is we're going to add water to our cakes again. We're going to then add more and more water to our existing paint to make it lighter and lighter as we go across. This is how you create lighter tones. The more water, the lighter it's going to be. The more paint mixed into your water, obviously the darker it's going to be. And this is the true tenet for how watercolor will work. I'm also building in layers. It's crucial that you don't feel like you need to get your color exactly the proper tone on your first pass. Use a hairdryer to speed things up. So I'm going back and doing additional passes of my layers of watercolors to get a better look. It was too light, so I wanted it a little bit darker. Works exactly the same way. You add water to your paint, You build those layers. Don't try to get it all done in one pass. You need to build your layers. I'm going to talk more about layer building on future watercolor videos. Here I had a little bit too much. It was too dark. So I grabbed a paper towel. I quickly dabbed up the excess water and paint, and then I was able to go back and do a lighter pass to make the proper tone of color that I was looking for. Doing one more pass because I want to see if I could get it a little bit richer. You can obviously see the colors in this set are darker than our praying set.
Don't! Got it!
Traditional tube watercolor paints. So you need to do a paint palette, squirt out a little dot of paint, and then that's all you're going to need. In fact, I wasted a lot of paint because I should have used so much less, and then I'm adding my water, and then I'm slowly building up my surface. Personally, I really like using these. I feel like I have a lot of control. Since I've been a painter, this feels very comfortable for me. And just keep building up your layers until you're satisfied. And our oil pastel set. So these go on just like oil pastels or crayons. It looks very scratchy on the textured surface of the watercolor paper, but it's going to turn out great. So at first you think this is going to look pretty bad because it looks like crayons, but as soon as you add that water, it activates the oils and turns it into paint. I've not used these types a lot, but I do find it pretty fun, and it feels almost a little bit magical to go from scratchy to smooth. You can always add more layers if you wanted to get darker. And our last set of watercolor colored pencils. You color just like regular colored pencils, so if you're scared about painting, this is a great place to start because it feels very, very comfortable. And of course, you just add your water and it turns it into paint. So there you have it, 5 different methods of using watercolors. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you.
If you liked today's video, go ahead and click on this one too. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to Create Art with Chris right here.